I am very, very honored to be able to come on telephone today to begin your very, very important gathering. I just learned this morning, excuse me, some of the very important and crucial work that you people do. I take my hat off to all of you. So with that, I'm going to start my prayer. I ask that you pray with me in your own way, as many prayers together are stronger. How momo ufdawino, Creator of all things, Heavenly Father, we pray to you today and we give you thanks, Creator, for this most beautiful day that you've provided for us. We give you thanks for the gifts of this season that you've brought. We give you thanks, Creator, that yesterday in our community we got a blanket of snow. Beautiful, clean snow. Let the plants and the berries rest till spring, and that it bring water to the earth. We give thanks for that, Creator. Give thanks also for the gift of life, the gift of health, the gift of love, the gift of family, and, Creator, the very special gifts of children, as they are our future generations. Heavenly Father, I give you thanks that we're able to bring together all of these people that are doing a very important, very, very important piece of work that helps with communities during times of disaster, during times of emergency. Because, Creator, when that happens in communities, it is a very, very difficult time for families, for elders, for children and babies who very often do not understand what is going on. So all of these people that step in and become the frontline workers, Creator, I give thanks for all of you. I give thanks also that this initiative has become of global interest, and that people from around the globe are able to share with each other the best practices, taking very often from the knowledge of the culture and traditions of our Indigenous ways. That makes me very excited, good Creator, that these very people are carrying on and holding on to that precious knowledge of our generations and ancestors past. That will guide us, will guide our youth, will guide our children in the future as we prepare for the very many changes that are coming with climate change, with the many disasters that people have not seen to such state that they hit our communities. And I'm so very thankful, Heavenly Father, that this initiative is bringing together elders and youth. That's the way of our Indigenous peoples globally pass on our values and our cultures and our traditions. Very often we do it orally. That's most precious, good Creator. I give thanks that there gives all of us hope. For it's that hope that keeps us moving forward, and the faith that has been provided through our many teachings, through our prayers, and through what we pass on to our children. Heavenly Father, the words of preparing our home are of strength, because that is most precious, our home fires, where we come together with love, with our families, our family strength. So I pray, good Creator, that all of these people that are on this call today, that their home fires are safe, are filled with love, and that on returning to their home fires, that they find their loved ones healthy and safe. I'm honored today, Creator, to be able to offer this prayer. And I pray to you, Mamo Tawino, and I give thanks. Kinanaskumten. Okay.
Kinanaskumten. Thank you, Casey. Kinanaskumten, that's Cree. For those, I think there's a few Cree speakers on here that just says thank you very much. We're just thank Casey. Thank you so much. I think, Lily, you're quite generous. I do tell stories, you guys. I get easily distracted. If you ask me a question, I'll go off on a tangent very easily. And Warwick probably knows that about me. And so I wrote a whole list of talking points of trying to stay on course. So one of the pieces you guys may or may not know, but up here in Fort McMurray in 2016, there was a large fire. I mean, it was international. Everyone knew about it. People from all over the world contributed to it. And we were most generous. They raised about $310 million just for that through Red Cross. And Red Cross was very generous to share those resources with the municipality and the many communities in this area. So we give a big thanks to Red Cross. People have said to me, oh, Red Cross takes the money. I can assure you Red Cross spent the money here. They did a great job on that. I was one of those skeptics, but I made good friends with many of these people. And so they're most honorable, they're most generous, and they're very selfless. I think that's the right word, selfless peoples, good people. So how I'm going to attempt to do this when I'm talking to you guys is thread a couple of things. So one of the pieces was, in a disaster is the recovery and the rebuild. And I want to keep on this resilience, but words that I don't understand resilience well enough, so I want to go to thriving. So when you move through your processes, recovery has got to be the ugliest part of it all, the most painful part of it all. Rebuilding tends to be very hopeful, and you start feeling like, I think I'll get back on my feet here. And what we've done here has gone beyond that, and we're thriving. So we're all out doing what we do. People have forgotten about the fires to the extent that they're just living in, I wouldn't say enjoying life, but they're enjoying life. They're really, we as an organization here at McMurray Métis are growing and moving with many pieces that we put together from the fire, or not even, from the fires, and then moving forward. So I'm just going to take you through some stuff here. I think Lily said it. I had a little bio about myself that I would have done. So my own history is my actual degree is in social work. So I kind of bring a different perspective, and as I got older, I began to appreciate more what that really implies. If you come to McMurray, it's about business. It's about getting wealthy. Well, I'm sorry. I come up here and I was about helping the community, help the community build. And I hope someday I get wealthy, but I enjoy what I have and I appreciate it. And I'm grateful for what I have. Wealth as well, I guess I should spend more time on it. Maybe all of us should. But when you're in the helping field, we have a tendency to take care of that community. That's who we are. So I'm gonna just go through some stuff. Like I said, I made some talking points when I talked about my social work degree. If anyone has done social work, you have your various areas that you work in. This one, either you can go to clinical, you can go into community development, or you can go into administration. I tended to wobble all over the place instead. I have a bit of politics in my background, economic development, a lot of community development, and what I do today. And I was in the alcohol and drug field, working in the alcohol and drug field for quite a few years. But all of these pieces really do help me, but help us in the work that needs to be done when you're going through a disaster and a recovery. Because recovery, I mean, there's a personal side to it, but there's a community side to it. In this case, there was a whole region, like a large region that had to recover from this, from a fire. I should tell you that in that disaster, one of the funniest things, I'm using the wrong words. One of the great things that happened was, sometimes one might feel a bit, we felt a bit, yes, sir. Yeah, doing a presentation. That's okay. That's Russell. He's our sustainable resource man there. I'll talk about that later. He's such an important player in all of this. But in this community, First Nations and Métis people felt silent, felt unnoticed. Because you had 3,000 people here living in and around the area. Then you have 80,000 people swarm and you disappear into the population. You're suddenly just a pebble on that sand beach. You really you're not noticed. So your place and your role and your identity suddenly becomes insignificant. But during the fires, everybody was helping everybody. People were helping others because they were there. They were helping each other without even asking, who are you? They just helped each other. There was a great sense of unity and a great sense of togetherness. And we all talked about it. We talked to people that are from everywhere in the city and town, and they all felt that unity. I think that's pretty significant when you're pulling together, because when you've lost everything, or there's a few, so it's not everyone that lost everything. In fact, the areas that were burnt out the most in the city and town were the poorest sections of town. And a lot of people lived in those houses and that were built, they were almost like original builds. And so they went up in flames like nothing. They didn't have the best infrastructure, best sewer system, best water system. And so even if the fire halls attempted to turn on their taps, it would have been not very helpful. And they were working on, they were and are continuing to work on those infrastructure pieces. In 2020, so for my own role in 2016, in 2013, I moved back to Fort McMurray. Before that, I had helped with this particular local Métis organization, put itself together. So when I was telling you, the Métis kind of disappeared. They decided they wanted to get back on their feet and regroup and pull themselves together. So in 2004 to 2008, I assisted with building the system, the organization here, to help it get back on its feet, along with a board, a really dynamic board, and they allowed me to do a number of things to make that happen. And then I left for a few years, went and gained more knowledge on economic development and politics and administration and stuff. When I came back and worked for an environmental company for 3 years. So it was why I'm saying all this is because every piece of experience one has actually helps. It's like a tool. It helps you when you're doing whatever you're doing. So sometimes it may seem strange that you're wandering off and doing some strange work. But in the end, as you get older, you start to realize every one of those tools help you in your job as you're moving along in life. So then so when I was up here doing the environmental work, that ended and the week later the fire hit here on May 24th. It's funny how that probably sticks in all of our minds here. And they finally put an end to the fires, and we're allowed to come back on June 24th. While there were still fires, they weren't what they call out of control. everything that was. And so when I came back, this was a ghost town. We had 88,000 people here before the fires, and when it was over, we were lucky to get 60,000 back. And it was, and I suspected would, and that was especially in July and June, July, and August. And it was only to September that the kids came back. So the streets started to get full, and the schools, because of the kids, the schools were full. Were moving about, but it was a very haunting, desolate place. It was like it was burnt out and black. It was black everywhere. All the trees that were spruce were left standing in black pigs, like black toothpicks poking in the air. So it was kind of it was very, I don't know if frightening is the right word. It was very, it's like some of those movies you watch and the end of the world comes and it's devastated. It did look like that. It did feel like that. So it was strange because during that time I was also I sat on the Friendship Center, the Native Friendship Center in town here, as vice president. And when we came back in June, Bill and I, the president, and I opened those doors to the Indigenous peoples that were coming back. So what I mean by opening doors is we said, well, we've got to receive our people. We've got to have a place for them to come to. We didn't have much. We had stacks of water, and people were glad to come pick up some water. And then we talked to the municipality and Red Cross, and they provide a whole bunch of counseling type services for people, plus some payments. People were getting some payments that lost everything. As we went along, we realized that we could get more, so we went to the Red Cross Reception Center. We were able to get cleaning supplies so people could go home and clean their place better. We got hampers, and so we became very popular because we were able to give out hampers to people. It's like, oh, wow. So that was kind of cool, and it wasn't just Indigenous people. As it turns out, a lot of people came by. They felt more comfortable. I have to admit, we're a little bit poorer than the rest of the neighbors, but a lot of times people feel a little more comfortable with our poor folk over there. So that was very important, though, to our community. And as far as now, I'm going to go to our Métis local here. We sat on some land. We sit on land. We own this land now, 9.3 acres. So it was about 8 acres that the local was situated on after the fires. And so beside that local, so it was a forestry building, forestry office, forestry land, and the whole place got burnt out, wiped out. And when it got wiped out, the forestry bunkhouses and their operations were burnt to the ground. They just packed up and left and went to another fancy place just out of town here at another forestry operations they have, and took all their people. What the local ended up doing as a result of them leaving is go to the government and purchase this land. I'm making it short, it's very cutting to this short. There's a lot more to it. But in the end, they ended up purchasing this land and added this piece here and it came to 9.3 acres. So part of that, so that becomes now part of the recovery piece of work. They were able to plant. So before they even built the building on here, we had a kind of a tent. We had a little gathering in a tent in March. It was still cold. I never forget that because even though we felt displaced and felt a bit of a big loss as a community, that what now? Where are we going to go? Our leadership got together and said, well, we're not going to just sit back and mope about it. Let's get together. So we had a feast and speeches and talking about how we're going to rebuild, how we're going to get back on our feet, and we're going to become even better. And it was very encouraging because they had some of the leaders from the municipality in different places, and talking like that, talking to the members, encouraging members. It was very important. It was very important to feel like we're together, to feel hope, and that would, even despite the fact that this place was burnt down and devastated, we weren't devastated as people. I think that's the real message that I think our leaders wanted to say. And when we talked about it, we need to do that. I think it's important to come together. And so during that period, they ended up hiring me actually. And so it was kind of a combination between the municipality and the McMurray Métis here that said, we need to hire a person that will assist us during this disaster. So I got hired to be their person, disaster recovery strategist. I was also working in partnership with the First Nations organization. It's called ATC or Athabasca Tribal Council. So Lisa and I became pretty good buddies after a while, but just the planning, just in recovery. So a large part of that recovery was just working with the municipality. They had such great people at their office, so we got to sit with them and listen to how the municipality was recovering, and we could run our programming in parallel for our community with what they're doing. And some of those themes that I kind of liked was things like, we're here for you, you're not alone kind of thing. And so they ended up creating a number of festivals and festivities, I guess, that would inform people that we're here. We're not going away. We're going to be together. We're going to stick it out together. And that's what happened. So there was a large, that idea was generated, it was more than that. I mean, people lost homes. When the people here evacuated, they dispersed everywhere. Literally, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, some went to Ontario. And so when our operations headed out of town, they ended up in Edmonton. And so they ended up getting some offices in Edmonton and started calling our elders and then our members and saying, where are you? How are you? What are you doing? That was so important. A lot of our members started crying that our staff would actually take time to ask them how they're doing. Where are you? Are you okay? And I don't know that we had a whole lot of resources at that point. But it was years later and people calling and saying, thank you for asking. Thank you for calling. Thank you for taking the time. And as we continued to build, so that was an important piece in our recovery, was just not forgetting our peoples. And they didn't want to be forgotten. When they say people didn't die in the fire, and that's true, but we lost quite a few people when they left here and went to different places. We lost one of our elders, and she went to BC. They found a home for her there. And she was 99 years old. She was our elder, probably the most beautifulest lady. Our elders even call her the elder, that kind of thing. So when they do that, that she's an elder. So Elsie left us and passed away, and Lady Smith on the island, Vancouver Island. But I swear she left her spirit here, because I believe that her energy still guides us to this day. And a number of other people, a lady went to BC and found a place to stay there with some friends. Phoned me and said, Bryan, I've always had a bit of an alcohol and drug problem, but I'm going to quit. I need your help. And I said, yeah, let's do this. And was a week or two later, she passed away, So there was losses that way. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to place that. Because it definitely wasn't the fire, but it was extreme stress, displacement, a lot of pain out there for folks. And so those were some tough lessons when people get displaced like that, how they need to be supported. And so we were doing as best we could to support all the members that came back, for sure. Those that left was a little more difficult. And so to try to get the resources wherever they are, and that's what I did, is try to help her secure resources in those areas in BC where she went. In any case, that's always a challenge, and that was a challenge. Here we lost, amongst our own members, we lost 40 homes, and I say 40 homes, it's probably 39. And then we had about the same amount that were damaged from the fires. So when I say damage, that fire melted down the sidewalls of some, or would burn a roof, would stop right there. Others had just wiped their houses, and the whole section downtown there, one place, Waterways, the oldest part of the city, that just cleaned out all the trees and all the houses. So I think there was 3 houses standing. And anyone who's in firefighting said, we don't understand why those 3 houses stood while the fire ate up all the other ones. In the midst of Abasan, there was most of the houses were burned, but there was some houses left standing. So it always shocked people. Why are these houses standing? So they did a lot of assessments on that. And there's a lot of, one needs to be very aware of how, what they call being fire smart, not building your fences up against your house, cleaning your eavesdrops, having your shingles set in a way so that the fire by your embers don't stop there and start a fire. There's so much to learn from all of that, and we learned a ton of stuff. And so we're trying to talk to our members about being fire smart now, as far as when fires go. Ton of lessons from that one. But and for our people that experienced the fire, now you're going through this recovery. So some people had insurance and great insurance companies. Others had some insurance companies that were fighting them every inch of the way for everything that they wanted to rebuild. And then you had people that didn't have insurance at all. So those were the challenges we had as far as that part goes. That was a huge piece of work. It took at least a good year or 2 to settle some of that down. To this day, we still have. The other thing that we experienced during the fires was a bunch of scammers, people coming up and promising to build and help people build their homes, and then take the money and run. So one of the things, if I was to ever say in disasters, be wary of scammers, of these do-gooders. They sound good, but don't give them money until they get the job done. So I don't know how you say that, but we had so many of them up here. It was there. They abused the people that already were experiencing losses. That's just how low can you go? Yeah, I got emotional about that one, tell you. Like, how low can you go and taking advantage of people that have already experienced loss, Take their money. Yeah. And lots of our people are not, a lot of people are just hardworking people. They don't understand a lot of the legal ramifications. So we have to have lawyers, and we have to have people helping them with their agreements and their contracts and their insurance pieces. And yeah, those are, and property and developers and all that. There's so much to all that. So that's a whole exercise in of itself, understanding development, recovery, and rebuilding that way. We were lucky in the end. We had quite a few people that helped people without insurance. Some of our members, we had the Good Samaritan Purse, I think that's what they call that. I forgot the name already. It's been a while. The municipality had a department that helped people get money back. And Red Cross helped so many of our people that had been experiencing difficulties anyway. And when they lost everything, I don't know if you guys experienced this at all, but in this community, a lot of people wouldn't ask for help. And a lot of the poorer people refused to ask for help. So Red Cross called me and said, Bryan, can you go and talk to these people? And so I had to convince some of the poorer people that it was okay to ask for help. That they're not beggars, that there's people I had some multimillionaires here that demanded that they get their house rebuilt, that it was their right to have their house rebuilt. Whereas some of these old people were like, give it to somebody who needs it. I couldn't believe it, So it took me a while to get them to come around and to accept an offer. Trying to turn it into, it's not a handout, that kind of a language. It amazed me the kind of depth our people have. They're such good people. They prefer someone else get help. So in this time disasters, you can see the good souls and you can see the other souls. So not so good souls. Yeah, there's a lot of learning that takes place in any disaster. I'll just toss this one out to you guys. So we had the flood in 2020, And of course, you guys all experienced the pandemic. So we've had a few, we all together had the pandemic. So as Canadian in the world, we've shared that one. We had a flood later, and just saying that not everybody was affected. It was mostly the downtown people that were affected. But a lot of the same, same pain, a lot of the same losses are the same. Like when you lose something, you lose your house, you lose your property, you lose your basement. Those can be they are very devastating, very giving people a sense of helplessness and hopelessness, really, really difficult times. And so we worked hard to help our peoples recover in both cases, in 3 cases. And so when you talk about a community, it's important in our case that we were there to support our members. And I think it's not only rejuvenated it, but it's given our peoples a lot of not only hope. Well, hope, of course, is important. A sense of belonging. Somebody does care. They're not forgotten. There's so many important things that's important to them. That when we work this way, that it leaves a meaningful impact on people. So our community is growing. From the fires, we had 278 signed up members. Today we have close to 800 members. That's in the last, so 2016, that's 8 years. And more people coming out of the woodwork and just seeing the good work we do and wanting to be a part of that, and and maybe even being proud. I mean, being able to hold their heads up. So I don't know, you guys may know a lot about trauma, but I'll tell you a little bit about what I've learned about trauma. So in the First Nations and Métis communities, they've experienced traumas long before there was these disasters in the last few years. They've experienced traumas not only to the residential schools, but loss of lands, loss of mobility, loss of power, loss of their place in the society. So that's not new to them. So when they get in disasters, it's almost like, yeah, here we go again. While others experience extreme pain around it, they just say, well, yeah, it's painful, but so are all the other losses. So there's what we call trauma on trauma on trauma. And so the work is a little deeper than what we're experiencing. Yes, it's important. Yes, it's important to get ourselves together in the fires, the floods, and the pandemic. But when you have deep-seated traumas, when you've been displaced for many generations, you have your own family generations experiencing that. So it's kind of a huge dynamic that one needs to be aware of if you're working with Indigenous communities, First Nations and Métis communities, that these traumas are really deep. Anyway, so that's, well, if you're aware of that, you can talk that through with people and help them work their emotions through, their losses through, and make sure there's resources for them. I don't know about you guys, but when this disaster hit, what happened is we had so many people come from all over, Edmonton, all across Canada. People come to help us. So they were there from May and June and July. And all of a sudden, August, things went quiet. All of these resources disappeared on us. And so it was almost like another emptiness. It was another void that was created because we had all these people running around. They didn't know what they did. Actually, they were just busy. They were busy. I don't know if they're being curious or if they're actually helping. It looked pretty important what they were doing. But I also felt the void when they left. And so did our peoples. Like, where did they go now? So that was an interesting part of this. I don't know if you guys have been experiencing disasters. We suddenly had all kinds of people wanting to do studies and research on us, on the community, there was 7 type of researchers here. So I thought that, well, I know that because we have a researcher that I work with, and when she got wind of all of them, she pulled them all together and said, well, maybe you want to report to the community what you're researching. And did you get the authority to do that research? And if you're doing that, have you got permission? And is it going to be, how is that, who owns that research? Who possesses it? You guys are familiar with OCAP. OCAP stands for ownership, control, possession, ownership, control, access, and possession. That's what it is. So it's very important if you're working with Indigenous communities that they feel they're a part of that research rather than, I always say this, rather than doing it to them, is doing it with them. So that they have a great role to play in all of this and that they give you permission. Anyway, so those are all amongst other things. That was another piece we needed to contend with. Just thought it was interesting. I tossed that when you're in disasters, you'll have people trying to really understand. I think their intentions are well. Meaning they want to understand how this is. If this happens again, maybe we can share this knowledge with the world, and the world will be a better place. I don't know if anybody ever got those researches, and I don't know that it made a whole darn bit of difference because it's all at the university and it's stuck at some shelf there. And so I don't know if their research even touched our community, except my researcher. She's stuck with us through the community. She's still with us. And we've talked at long length about what all of that means and try to understand what happened to us. How can we do this better? There was researchers from all down east, Ontario, New Brunswick, everywhere. I don't know what the research is saying. I don't know if we're going to be better people for it, or a better community, or a better society. I think we should put a stop to those researchers if it's just themselves patting themselves on the back and their university. Because if you guys are related to connected universities, they like to take control and ownership, and it becomes their piece. Well, what good is that if it's not helping our community? So that's an important, to me, I get my backup when I now have researchers around. Anyways, by the way, I'm going to stop and let you guys ask questions. I can talk all day. Did you know that? I find it very easy. So the fires helped. I'm going to tell you how it helped. When the fires hit, the town firefighters and the provincial wildfire department actually were sitting there pointing at each other and saying, no, it's your job. No, it's your job. And so while they were busy not taking responsibility, the fires took off and rampaged this place, as you all know. But so during that period, because of that devastation and that lack of working together and the inability to work together and lack of resources, because we had a different government at that time that decided that we shouldn't be putting that much kind of money into firefighting. So they cut back. And so it was kind of one of those situations where that department was like, we have enough resources. Well, guess what? They had to spend over several $1 billion anyway. So either you take care of it or it'll take care of you. And in this case, it took care of our departments. So what happened is now when the floods hit, the governments weren't so quick to say we can't do this. They just got all over it. And they still had not had the best, not only recovery plan, they didn't have much of a recovery plan. It was after that flood that they did so much to readjust their infrastructure, their sewer systems, their water systems, just about anything you can imagine. They're building, still to this day, right now, they're building berms all around the city. They were told to do that many years ago. They didn't do that. Now today, they smartened up and they are able to take those lessons, take a lesson from all of that and starting to do something about it. So there was some major connection. The connection is that the fires taught them they need to invest in protecting themselves. I guess I don't know if that helps at all, but that's the connection I draw from that.
Yeah, big good for that. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Brian, my name is Janelle Jacusta. I am Community Wellness and Protection with Canadian Red Cross. And I've been sitting in on recovery meetings here in BC, and I know Fort McMurray had the huge fire and everything, but the biggest thing I'm asked, like for Indigenous communities, what is the best approach, you know, when it comes to assisting them to get back to a place of ownership and resilience and all those pieces. And I've observed in community where it's like Environment Canada has got to give the green light before assistance can be given from EMBC or ISC. I'm just wondering, how do you change a structural system, you know, to allow communities to be more in charge of what they need financially?
So if you work in with First Nations, this is what I've learned. First off, the federal government have a different kind of emergency response plan for First Nations. When fires hit, it's often the provincial body that's responsible legally to intervene, meaning they can send their firefighters out there. What the feds will then do is attempt, and so having said that, and even their management plans are quite different. And then when the fire disaster hits, you're like, how come no one's talking to each other? Well, because you're not in sync. You're not connected. You're not, and I'm saying this intentionally because we went through the very same thing over here. So some of our chiefs are very aggressive over here. And two of them walked into what they call the center, the control center, reception center, and just kind of lambasted the leadership there. Leadership as in the fire, the municipalities, emergency management people. In the end, all they could do is say, you know what, we'll do the best we can. We're doing the best we can, but they don't have a formal relationship. So a formal relationship has to be created, has to be revisited, and that has to be, they have to come in sync. If you don't do it, they'll still go back, and then 10 years from now, it'll still be the same language. Okay, we'll try to help you, but that's not what you want. You want to be able to say, we're together. As soon as a fire hits, we're all notified equally. We have the same resources. We can be engaged. And so there's so much that needs to happen to keep that, to ensure that the First Nations are walking along the same path together. That's because that doesn't happen. With the Métis people, we're just Joe citizens, so we don't get any attention at all and any recognition or any calls, or we didn't. But during the flood emergency, so EMS, Emergency Management Services, was on the phone with us every day saying, Bryan, tell your bosses, tell your members, this is what we're doing. So we could inform our members very quickly and my bosses what the plan is. And so but it took us all that time to build the relationship. So I would say, Janelle, there needs to be a lot of work in building relationships, but also understanding the agreements, and that's between the federal government, provincial governments, and the municipalities, because they're quite important, and to build that relationship. I hope that helps a little bit.
I think it gave a quick summary of how to, so thank you.
Yeah, it's very quick. It takes actually a lot of hours to go through this, but it's a very important one. If you take a look at those agreements, those emergency management plans that they have, if they're not talking to each other, well, they're not talking to each other. I mean, if that makes any sense. Anyone else? Well, then you know what I can do is I have a few more pieces I can tell you guys about that I've done. Oh, somebody, unfortunately, I need to sign off.
Thank you for being here, Elizabeth. Bryan, I was wondering if you could just briefly, for people who are not familiar with the Métis history in Alberta and how unique this is, and just the spirit of Métis in the recovery and thriving, as you called it, not resilience, but thriving.
Yeah. In Canada, we'll tell you this, Métis will tell you this, we were here long before the Europeans in Western Canada. So Canada, where the Rupert's land is where the Métis homelands are, before there was a Canada. So our people evolved as a people, culture, as a language in this country in the West, not in the East. So I know a lot of people are trying to come on from the East and saying we're Métis, but it's an evolution. It took a couple hundred years to evolve into a people with our own culture, with our own way of living and our own lifestyles. So it didn't just happen because it didn't just happen. because we got in the Constitution. We actually, I was a part of the teams that helped get our name Métis in the Constitution in 1982. I have to say I was more of a, I just made the motion for our leadership in this province, and then they took it forward with all the leaderships across all the provinces across Canada, which is the Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. BC and Ontario came on later, so they've become a part of that Métis Nation. And so but the Métis people have evolved as a culture, and they're certainly are strong up here in this area. They have fought with this provincial governments, because it was Louis Riel, whether you guys know it or not, it was Louis Riel that designed what they call provinces today. He called it a provisional government. They took the very same design that he created and used those demands, if you want to call it, to create provincial legislation. So that's the historic piece. So we have a very significant piece to role in Canada. Yeah. And so that's part of it. There's a legal, there's a political, there's the cultural parts to us as part of being a part of Canada. And we're very present. We're very present, as in, we're very obvious. We make ourselves very well known all over the place. I don't know if that's helpful. So what's important? What we learned was important about the thriving part is that means pulling ourselves together, getting back on our feet. And so the gatherings that we did, even we had a tent gathering, pulling everybody together and saying, well, we can do this, we're going to do this, you know, that cheering each other on, and then actually doing something about it. So I was part of a number of studies, one of which was the Métis cultural study. Right after the fires, 2017, we had a study done on getting a Métis cultural center going, and that would be our place to house ourselves, have an office, but display or showcase our culture. They're building that right now. So if you go online and type in McMurray Métis Cultural Center, you'll see this huge structure coming up and evolving. It's designed like an infinity sign, and you'll see the topographic view of it. It's a beautiful structure. And so that'll become where our offices are. These were burnt out. We have different ideas about that. What we did is also, I have to tell you guys, a bunch of Red Cross people on there. Thank you, Red Cross. I want to say that 1,000 times. We had a fellow called Guy, and what was here often and came, and we said, you just got to come here. You know, typically you want to have meetings and stuff. Just come here. Just come and visit and grab a coffee here and sit with us. That's how you get to know us. If you keep this meetings and you got to be all formal, that's not good for us. We're kind of informal. Come and sit on the deck with us and tell a story or whatever. What's going on? So in doing that, we were able to then feel comfortable, work with Red Cross, and we got half of what we lost. We lost our offices, we lost our yard, our compound, all our facilities, all our equipment, all our tools. And that was a huge part. And getting some of that back was so important to us because we just felt lost without it. So we were able to get that back. Along with that, we started redoing our cultural activity. Once a year, we have Métis Fest, and we invite the whole municipality to come out. And it was, for whatever reason, the first couple, 2-3 years, we'd have about 1,800 little squealing children coming over here and hollering. Last year, we had 2,600 people, but it was open to the whole community. They redesigned it, rebranded it a bit, so that everyone felt welcome. And they keep trying different ways to tweak it so that everyone feels welcome. So that's good for us. And they're working at it right now. We have on November 16th, I don't know if you guys know, but our martyr, our leader, our national leader was Louis Riel. He was hung for standing up for the West, for what he believed was our rights. They tried to get him to say he was insane and that he did what he did out of insanity. And he says, no, I'm of sane mind, and I make this decision knowing I will probably die and get hung, which he did. We have the Riel, we call the Riel Day, but it's actually more of a Métis week where we celebrate our culture and share that with the communities. And that's important to us. So, and also they're working on the elders dinner. What we do once a year is we have a big dinner for our elders to acknowledge those who are great elders of the year. And of course, we have much music and dance and food. That's what goes on. It's a good way to pull people together. And so we have monthly meetings here. We talk to our members and tell them what we're doing, how we're doing. And it's a great way to feel like you belong to something. Along with that, we have a ton of little, what we call, so we have we have a thing called conversational we have paint night, crafts night, elders tea. So there's a lot of different ways to try and make sure, bring people together and keep together. So that's part of your thriving is keep getting together, keep talking, keep laughing, keep telling stories and joking. I say joking because I was at a funeral the other month where my aunt passed away, and despite my dear aunt passing away, we were still telling jokes. And the priest comes to us, he says, I worked with Métis people for many years now. The one thing you guys do is you always have to tell jokes and laugh your head off. And he said, that's got to be one of your greatest strengths. He says, because I noticed that lightens up, you know, and we make fun of ourselves and each other, as I hate to say it, but each other, you know, so those storytellings and jokes are, sometimes they stretch their stories a bit to get the better laugh. And so those are important pieces. And when you're rebuilding is to tell your story. And even when people are running from the fires, I mean, everyone had a terrifying story. Now they're able to talk about it and kind of look back, maybe teary-eyed, but still laugh at themselves. How terrified they were, you know, sitting in a fire. Yeah, so telling stories and jokes is very important. Belonging and getting together, creating that sense of belonging is very important for community, but for everybody. Yeah, so that's pretty important. Now we're going to go into music and dance, I hear, so I want to be part of that. I don't know if that's helpful, but, and of course our governance, our people, our leaders that have getting together. Right now, I should tell you, this very month, November, the Métis Nation has changed its, pushing its plan to become a government, probably a fourth order of government. It'll be legislated at the federal level. They'll be able to govern their own affairs. And it's going to be called Utipimswak Métis Government. So if you go online or look for Métis Nation, you'll see all kinds of get out and vote kind of stuff. Vote yes, let's rebuild, let's move forward as a nation. So yeah, there's a bigger picture as well, for sure. I don't know if that's good. You guys have any questions? Warwick.
Thanks for sharing all of this, Brian. And really, I've heard some little bits and pieces from previous meetings, but I appreciate the extra insight. So I've been doing some interviews with people in predominantly Métis communities in Saskatchewan here, and there are a lot of people that are still looking to share their stories from fires in 2015. And I'm just wondering, you know, you mentioned about how there's been a lot of progress within the McMurray Métis. Is that driven by leadership, or is that grassroots? Who's really spearheading these opportunities for people to share their story?
All of that. The leadership does some of that. Some of us drive some of that. So, and Red Cross is a part of that. So Red Cross was willing to put a few dollars aside to have a video made and then some stories told. And people got together and they actually did that, and they had a, whatever they call that, when you put on a movie day and you showed a movie. It was very moving. And then they had another, Red Cross sanctioned another piece by a couple of people, and they didn't, in any case, what they did is they did an animation. And they had Lauren Cardinal and Tantum Cardinal and all of these other Indigenous people and other different people, actors, do the animation, and it was so cool. And they told the same story, like, man, I was so scared. I was like in the fire, and this little animation goes on, and it just tells that story in a way that just hits home and doesn't get caught up in personalities, and I think one was the wolf, and one was the different animals. All these animals had a role to play, and if you ever get a chance to get that one, it really speaks about McMurray. I'll send me a note, Lily, and I'll get that from Guy, and I can share that with you. There's a lot of politics involved. I mean, really, our city council, our provincial, province leadership, the federal government, they all played roles, different roles. Of course, they're trying to poke fingers at each other, and some of it just said, get to work and stop pointing fingers. Who cares? Do what you can to make it happen. And so up here they don't like Trudeau, so it was all Trudeau's fault. And so I had to remind him that he had nothing to do with it. A fire started by some idiot, so that's how it went. And the two people that were supposed to put it out, they didn't put it out. So this blaming stuff didn't really make any sense. Anyway, that's what they do amongst the politicians. But our leaderships themselves were fairly persuasive to keep things going, and that included the First Nations. They demanded, they went and demand some acknowledgement and support and resources, and that was good for them. And we did the same thing. But everyone has their own way of doing that, though. Yeah. I'm very persistent. I try to be as nice as I can, and I just keep at it, and trying to figure out building relationships. I should tell you is another thing that fell out of this with the municipality. We did not have a great relationship with the municipality. And so we tried very hard to engage them in emergency management, emergency social services, their economic development, their Indigenous relationships people. And today we're working on a graveyard project. So that when you talk about moving forward, our elders got together Tuesday, before the snow. It was kind of snowy, but they were so emotional about it because what happened in our case, our graveyard has 240 graves that are unmarked. 90% of them are Métis or First Nations graves, but likely First Métis. My point behind that is we were able to talk to the municipality because of the number of years of building relationship, and they were just happy to work with us. That never happened before. If we called them, they would feel terrified of us because we're going to attack them. We did have one lady attack them, was like, oh my God, and she can be so aggressive, and I didn't know she was going to do that. I would have talked to her long before we'd have brought her into that arena with us, because we're pretty civil, we're pretty respectful. Anyway, so that happened there, and it continues today to grow as a result of that, those relationships through hard times, Is that helpful, Ulrich?
Yeah, and I mean, I feel as a researcher doing some interviews, giving people an opportunity to share, I think it's been helpful for the few people that I have been able to talk to, but clearly the community at large still has a lot of trauma. I'm just, trying to imagine what it might take to help them move forward.
Well, what the municipality did here is because we got engaged, we were able to parallel their work. So if they talked about, let's get together, we're here for you, they'd hold workshops. But it's funny how that works. They post it, but God knows where they post it, because our community don't know what they're talking about. Oh, we're getting together, and there'll be 15 people showing up, and I'm saying to them, so excuse me, but shouldn't be telling the whole community? Well, we have, and like, okay, why aren't people here? Oh, I don't know. So we've got some people that are social media gurus or whatever. They're kids, but man, they're good at doing the Facebook and the web pages and emails and Instagram and who knows what else, whatever else. So when we put out we're going to do something, we got a good turnout just from these kids, their ability to let everyone know what we're doing. And when you can get together, then you can express yourself, talk about what happened, cry together, laugh together, tell your story. Everyone's got to tell their story. That's so important. And everyone is a different story. Yeah. I got a hill that was burnt out. Our property was one of the first. It's kind of the fire rolled up a valley and burnt out a whole section of property here. And so when you're coming over, when you has the fires coming up forest, the highway 63 is right there. And so people are, so that what happened is when people are evacuating, there was cars were bumper to bumper for probably 30 miles or more. So you could, if you wanted to pass somebody, you couldn't, because there was just too many cars in front of you. You'd have to drive in a ditch, and it didn't make no sense. You had to be following the car from front of you. And they were going at a snail pace. So they're inching forward. And so you get to sit in the fire. You get to watch that fire coming down. And she was telling me, she was with her daughters, and they were saying, "Mommy, let's open the window. It's too hot in here." And she's saying, "You can't open the window. It'll get hotter." And so they were crying, and they're inching their way up. And they got to the top of the hill, and there's a set of lights on the top of the hill, and her car stalled at the lights. And she said, 3 young fellows jumped out. I don't know what country they're from, she said, but they pushed my car across her. And when it got across the light, we pushed it into the side, and it caught on fire, her car. And they got her out of there and, saved her and all that kind of stuff. And then she had to call her family and come and pick her up and stuff like that. Well, I never forget that story, and how terrifying it would have been for a single mom with her girls sitting there. What are you going to do? You just have to trust that you can make it to the top of the hill, safely. That's a true story. Yes. From Sharon. As part of your Métis Corps EM Emergency Management Ops team, would you consider creating permanent storyteller, storykeeper positions? They would be the record keeper not only for officially event management, but also traditional records. Yeah, so we had a group of people that worked with us for years. What are they calling themselves? Willow Spring Consulting. And they were out capturing as many of the stories from the peoples as they could about the fire. I don't think, it's not anything to do with them. I don't think they had enough money to go and capture everybody's story. That would have been so awesome to get the stories of everybody. That even like telling you that story about story is like, oh my God, that's terrifying, But I'm sure that's each person that had to inch their way up that hill in that fire must have had similar kinds of experiencing. But yeah, it's kind of like what work wants to do is capture stories. But if you got 200 people, there's 200 stories. That's what it boils down to. Yeah, and how you do that, I haven't got a clue. Red Cross was generous enough to give some money to capture some stories and trying to lump some story of it all. Trying to get the themes and trying to capture what people experienced. I don't know that they did a great job, but the attempt is better than not doing it, I suppose. Yeah. And yes, I think I'm a bit of a storyteller. As we have people around us, I'd like to tell stories. And so thanks for that, Sharon. So that was, I don't know if we did, how much time do we have? Because I got lots more to talk about. I just want to know your story or experience stuff. This is also should be an exchange, a bit of an exchange. I love talking about stuff like that. It's a great success story. We've had to support our Red Cross all along. I mean, if it wasn't for Red Cross, I'm sure we wouldn't have done this, because they just seemed to help us when we were down a bit, when we were feeling a bit helpless. And everything they did for us. And when you get your Quonset going back up and you get some tools and you can start building yourself around yourself for yourself. They built a bunch of sheds that they'd lost. So the guys got out there and built them, and they're all proud of their shed. Like, it could have been the ugliest shed in the world, but we were just proud of those sheds, It's like, wow, that's just great. So actually, they seem quite nice. And I think everyone else, we built a little Métis village here. We have a cabin here, and around that, people are starting to donate various kinds of old articles, canoes, dog sleds, Red River Cart. So all these kind of things go in the village, and we get a chance to talk about who we are and tell people what we're about. Yeah, we're unique, and we're part of the nation, but we are also part of an interesting culture here in Canada. So, and we help build Canada. I mean, that's the thing about the Métis people. They were very much entrepreneurial in the early years with the Hudson Bay and the Northwest Fur Trading Company. And they now are some of the most successful businesses here in this town. Yeah. Yes. Anything else? So go on. So for you guys' information, you might want to go online, check out the Métis Nation of Alberta, and you'll see all the information on the new government going forward. Then there's another piece with the McMurray Métis. We have a lot of stuff on our cultural center, but a very dynamic team of communication team here. They're always posting stuff we do. When you talk about stuff we've done, we have when we recovered, one of the pieces we did as part of recovery is we put an orchard in the back there. So we lost all our trees. And we said, well, if we're going to recover this, why don't we put some berries in there back there or fruit trees back there? So we have an orchard tree of over 200 trees back there, apples, cherries, and plums. And so now one of the ladies here does the gardening and plants and shrubs. And as a result of that, the local received this thing called Community in Bloom. And we know it was her, though. Cheryl was the one that did the work. The local gets credit, but we all looked at her and said, we didn't do any work. You did all the work, you know. So it was interesting. So the local got the award for Community in Bloom. And then the municipality got acknowledged as internationally as a Community in Bloom. So a big award down in Vancouver. So you talk about moving forward and thriving. We're just trying to build this place as a beautiful place where people want to come and be a part of, you know. So we feel like we're part of the region, the municipality, the town, and this community. How's that?
That is an incredible ending to this beautiful sharing circle. May disasters offer these spaces for communities to bloom. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today.